Hey friends, we're going to be talking about a theme practice called Mr. Jones and Mrs. Potts. Not the Mrs. Potts from Beauty and the Beast, I hope. So we are going to be reading the story. We've already read an Aesop fable, so I wanted to give you a realistic fiction story to get an idea on that. We can also learn theme from that as well, since that's one that we are not going to be focusing on as a genre overall. So as we read, remember we read the first time we read to understand. We highlight or underline any words that we do not know. So at this time, I would like you to find this in your packet, and I would like you to glue it in, read it, pause this video, read it, and mark any words that you don't know. And then if there's anyone around, see if you can find out what those words mean, or you can look them up on the computer. So we understand what the author's saying. When we understand what the author's saying, then we're definitely able to read into, in between the lines, of what the author is trying to say in addition to the words. So I am going to be pretending like this is the second time that I read it, because I've already read it to understand. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my questions here, and I know that I'm going to be focusing on theme. And I remember, based on my notes from yesterday, that my theme is the lesson that a character learns, or the overall message or lesson that the author wants you to learn. So we look at characters' thoughts, we look at characters' feelings, we look at characters' actions and dialogues, and how do they change in the story. A lot of times we can look at the conflict between people and also see how they change in the story. So I'm going to take a couple, I have different colored pens here in case I need them. And I am going to have you answer the second question as our assignment. But I am going to give you the theme, and I want you to provide the evidence from the text. And that will be your assignment. So everyone in the apartment building knew that Mr. Jones and Mrs. Potts couldn't stand each other. They had both lived at 413 Apple Street for more than 50 years. 50 years, wow. They were next door neighbors, but never spoke after a fight over a borrowed soup spoon that was never returned. Well then, that must have been a really important soup spoon. As they got older, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Potts still didn't speak. Mr. Jones could not see very well in his older years and depended on his grandson, George, to take him to the grocery store every week. Even though the store was only a few blocks away, Mr. Jones could not do it alone. Next door, Mrs. Potts found that she couldn't hear as well as she could when she was younger. She especially couldn't hear when she was on the phone and relied on her great niece, Julie, to make important phone calls to her doctor for her. So far, I'm going to stop here and make sure that I understand what's going on. So they don't like each other, all because a long time ago, someone did not return a spoon. And they are neighbors and have been for 50 years. And they have some trouble because they're older and they rely on their younger family members to help take care of them. Nope, we're not there. One day, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Potts found themselves in trouble. Construction on their building made it impossible for George and Julie to visit that day. And Mr. Jones needed to go to the grocery store while Mrs. Potts needed to have a few important doctor calls made. In their distress, Mr. Jones found himself knocking on Mrs. Potts' door with a deal and a temporary truce. If Mrs. Potts could take him to the grocery store, he would help Mrs. Potts with her doctor calls. It seemed to be a match made in heaven, and they both forgot about that borrowed soup spoon for the day. So they asked for help. They didn't want help, but they did ask for help, and they actually helped each other. So a possible theme in this story, once I think about what they said and the situation that they're in, their history, and what they thought, and their feelings. A possible theme for the text is, no matter how you feel about someone, you can still help them. What do you think about that? I'm going to write that down. Oh, actually, let's start that with the theme is that no matter what, how about let's say no matter the history you have with someone, you can still help each other. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to answer the second question. What 2 to 3 details from the text support the theme you wrote? So you're going to go in the text and you're going to write 2 or 3 things that happened that tells us that the theme is no matter your history you have with someone, you can still help each other. So what happened in the story that taught us this?